Hello, welcome to Level Live. This is our monthly legal live stream where we talk about news, hot tips, and personal stories. I'm Daniel Bonner. I'm a director of Level Legal. We're excited to have you here. Today we're talking about the art of the steal, how forensics can help outsmart intellectual property thieves. So this month's special guest, it's an honor to be here with you, David Greedham. David joins us from PC Forensics and our recent acquisition as the Vice President of Digital Forensics at Level Legal. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be here with you.
I'm excited about this. You know this. I've told you personally. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
Professionally, as a human, and I wanted everybody else to know that. So this will be fun.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Absolutely. A couple of housekeeping items. This live stream is being recorded, and we will use it in the future. If you don't want to appear, go ahead and drop off. The video will be available for full reference. With that out of the way, and before we jump into talking about outsmarting IP thieves, I want to talk to you, David, the newest member of our team at Level Legal. David, as we mentioned, you came to us through an acquisition of PC Forensics. David, you're native.
Yes.
I believe you created the first patented and defensible collection device.
That's true. Back in 2008, it was.
Truly amazing. I also consulted with White House, New Scotland Yard, and Harvard University. It's an incredible resume.
Thank you.
So we're excited to have David here because of what he brings in terms of additional services to our clients. Clients that need somebody that can scale to meet their needs and do it in a way that delights and focuses on their outcomes. So David, we're thrilled to have you here. So what attracted you about Level Legal?
It's a great question. During my career, I've definitely focused on giving clients what's a good outcome for them. And that's been the priority in everything I've done. And in some cases that, in some parts of different industries, that's not always the case. And I worked with Level Legal. In fact, you're a customer of mine. I got to know you, Daniel, and Joey pretty well, and I was really impressed with the culture. You guys have the same focus. And I'm kind of peeling the onion back a little bit now, and it's behind the curtain, and I'm seeing that more so than I thought. So
that's great to hear. I appreciate the kind words. And the feeling's mutual. I remember it was a year ago this month, where we first met, sat down and had lunch, and began a great friendship and a professional relationship.
We did.
So,
and in that gap, I talked to other organizations who were interested in acquiring PC Forensics, and really Level Legal was the only one that was ever considered because of the culture that I can see in you guys.
It's so important. We're thrilled to have you. And looking forward to this discussion. We've got a lot to get into. And of course, we're talking about outsmarting IP thieves. I think it's important first, though, to talk about maybe the history of forensics and the discipline itself.
Well, it started a long time ago. I tell people I was 3 years old in the 80s, but maybe I was a little older. And it really started as a response to needs for law enforcement. A lot of talk in the late 80s and 90s about the $1,000 computer. PCs became available. Cost about $1,000, so it became affordable in the home and in the office. And prior to that, some people will remember, but there was mainframes and there was digital evidence, but it really wasn't PCs. And I'd worked for an organization that did some computer service work for local law enforcement. And they came to us as their computer guys and said, hey, we have this thing going on here. We don't really know what to do. And worked through that case, and that evolved into helping them set up a forensics lab and helping write some standards on how to image, how to preserve, how to validate that and introduce it as evidence. And I just thought it was really cool. I just thought, man, you can find out what people are doing on computers, and I was really attracted to it. And really from that time, I focused pretty much exclusively on digital forensics for the next 34 years.
Talk about being on the forefront. That's amazing. So something I hear often from clients is merging collections and forensics together. Could you distinguish those two things? It's important.
Yes. A lot of people think of forensics as collections, and an effective collection is a forensic process. And it's important, and lots of reasons for that, to preserve everything properly. But really, forensic analysis is really, what do you do with that? How do you investigate that data that you've ESI. How do you find out what's been going on with the computer? And so the analysis is distinctly different. There are some organizations that just collect, and there's a need for that. But really, we go beyond that. We collect lots of different data types these days, but perform the analysis as well, all the way through to bringing into evidence in court, expert testimony as needed, and so on.
I appreciate you sharing that. Well, that's an important foundation as we talk about IP thieves and IP theft as a discipline and a subset of practice of law. So could you help define IP theft?
Well, people might be surprised that there is so much IP theft going on. It's taking something that's not yours, essentially, is the theft element. The IP, intellectual property, is typically data that belongs to somebody else. We see a lot of people who work for a company for a long time. They maybe help create the client list or whatever collaboration tools they're using to gather information. But that belongs to the company. It's not theirs.
It's not theirs.
They may well create it, but they were getting paid a salary at that time. And so taking that from perhaps one employer to another, or from one employer to start your own business, or however, whatever the intent is, that belongs to the employer who was paying you while you did that work. And, it's trade secrets, it's confidential information. It could be the secret sauce, it could be the sales forecast for the next 3 months, it could be any of those things. But really, information within a company that is proprietary to the company that they own and that's highly confidential.
So as we discussed, sitting down to have this discussion, some of the statistics you shared were somewhat shocking to me, even being in the industry as long as I have. You want to share a few with the audience?
There are some estimates that the cost to industry in the United States for intellectual property theft is about $600 billion a year.
Wow.
It's 3% of GDP, something along those lines. It is a big issue. And from a forensic analysis point of view, it's probably 2/3 of the work that we do is working through that detection.
And that's where the investigation skills come in.
It's not, there's obviously some technological skills required, but some of it's mindset. How do you approach, a computer system, maybe it's an image, where do you start? Getting background information about the matter at hand, critically important, so that the investigation can be more focused. Because you could really spend 6 months looking at a computer system for everything. Even the Windows registry these days has more than 1 million lines. So really get some intelligence about what's happened or what's suspected to have happened. And really try to find out what a successful outcome for the client is and really focus in towards that.
That's helpful. I appreciate you sharing that. So as we talk about how to outsmart intellectual property thieves, I think it's important first to talk about how do we detect this activity.
Well, over my couple of years of experience,
just a few,
we tend to find there's a lot of similar traits. There's a fraudulent mindset. So certain things that people have done, and it changes over time with technology. It used to be people would eat things to their personal account. And then it was, USB became a thing. And I'm sure you can't remember times before USB, but there used to be serial ports and very, very small things. So people would copy things onto a USB stick and get pretty easy to hide.
Physical media.
Yeah, physical media. And we're not talking big drives that put your backpack in a little thumb drive. We've had cases where people have used USB watches and you never think to, check somebody's watch. And more recently, secure cloud, personal secure clouds, we see people accessing. So really, again, that intelligence you get up front is important. What are the company's policies? Do they have things in place to prevent this? Is it open game? You're our number one salesperson. You can do whatever you want. Here's your technology. But if people go online, they create internet history. They create internet history on their local computer. That can be analyzed. If you plug in a thumb drive, a series of external devices, there's information within the system, what happened, when it happened.
On the registry.
Part of the registry and other parts of the system, yeah. And it will show you what files were accessed, when they were accessed. Lots of other good, valuable financial information.
So obviously the technical skills are important, but more than that, maybe experience on where to look, what sequence,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
looking at prior cases as to what occurred.
certainly earlier on, I spent a lot of time in rabbit holes. Um, and yeah, it was new. It was all new. When USB came out and people got, and then of course you have updated operating systems. And most of the operating systems are really designed for the client with as a caveat, like an artifact of some of those actions, is that from a forensic analysis point of view, you can recreate some of those actions through understanding how that happens at the very start. A lot of rabbit holes, like I said. We would do things like we'd run some metering software on a Windows system, and we'd plug in a thumb drive and not do anything, and then stop and turn everything off and start looking at what files were changed during that last 7 minutes or whatever it was. And of course, today there's much more sophisticated tools, but understanding that process and going through that and then seeing many, many, many instances of this really does hone in where you're going to focus when you're looking at detecting IP theft.
I appreciate you sharing that. So something you told me that was fascinating, it relates to the comments you made about user experience driving some of the functions. Explain that example about resizing a folder and the trail down.
There's a thing in your registry called shell bags, and it's designed for the user experience. You're on your desktop, and maybe you want this folder bigger or smaller or to the right, or you want your icons to be in a different place, and you change it. And then when you come back to that, it's exactly where you left it. That's the caveat of something recorded in the registry for your experience. That's where you want the folder. From a forensic perspective, perhaps you've deleted that folder by now, and that folder doesn't exist anymore, but there's still a record of the folder.
With your settings preferences.
With settings preferences and the contents of the folder.
Okay.
A file listed essentially of the contents of the folder.
These are things bad actors may not think about. And one of the 1,000 tips and tricks you have, which is great. So on Level Table Live, we love interaction. We encourage everybody to ask questions along the way. But we do have a question that came in before we started.
Okay.
I think it's relevant here. So this is from me, Ontario, who's interested in advice when you have an employee that's departing, that's taken files, or where you suspect there might be IP leaving your corporate domain. What would you advise in terms of best practices?
Well, at some stage, you're going to have some cause to have this suspicion. So I'd make sure that's grounded and good. We have organizations with every department employee who take a full forensic image of the device. One is it's preserved, and two is they can redeploy the device to maybe a new employee. And if you have any suspicion, I think a full forensic image is a fairly simple, low-cost form of protection. Because if you do have to come and do some analysis, whether you're looking at the device history, whether you're looking at secure cloud usage, maybe even looking for search terms and get some indication there, you can do that with forensic imaging. You can do that retrospectively.
It's a great tip. So we've talked a little about detection, the key element to stopping IP theft. Let's talk a little bit about prevention. So kick that off. We have a second part to Neve's question.
Okay. Well, it's really interesting prevention in this world of technology where successful people get everything they want. I want 2 iPads, a laptop, and one. And some organizations give the crown jewels. And I think of it as, there's an information governance mindset that you give only access to what is needed to do your job. And I think about HR files, right? You might be the #1 sales guy, and you might just be killing it, but I'm not going to give you access to the HR files because there's lots of reasons why, but I'm just not going to give you access. And the way I don't give you access is by your access control limitations. So I don't give you access to the entire network, everything. I give you access to what you need to do the job. There's also some organizations, particularly in healthcare, where they will use policies within their IT department to lock down things like USB ports, to block things on their firewall for secure cloud connections and Dropbox and Google Drive, Box, and all. So that we tend to find is more of an information governance mindset. Give people what they need to do their job, but don't give them everything.
Right. That's helpful. So how does the way we work now, working remotely from home, impact this prevention practice you're talking about? And then maybe even with employees or engineers that have access to files, pre-IP.
It's a great question. It's a challenge. I think actually working from home hasn't made a massive difference to the overarching requirements to give people access to what they need to. If you have people who are working highly sensitive information and they're working from home or remotely, clearly security around that, what they can transfer, what they can save locally. Because if you end up in litigation, getting access to somebody's personal device is a challenge for the attorneys. So I think it's really putting procedures around that. Again, protecting your information. We have one client who will allow you to see things on the screen, but you can't scrape the screen, you can't print it. Screenshot will automatically blur it. So they're doing some things to protect it, yet providing information to the team member who needs it to do that.
That makes sense. So with the prevention practices you're discussing, obviously information governance plays a huge role here in a company's ability to recognize sensitivity of the data and make appropriate decisions with that in mind. That's very helpful. What other tips on prevention?
I think last year I did some work with an information governance institute, and they just drilled this in. It's like, give people access to what they need. You don't give them the HR records. Most companies don't let the sales team access their account system. So I think that mindset is really important. How you actually do that, it's technological solutions. We have clients who have the right to check people's emails. They use artificial intelligence to scan email for content. More words are being used. So there are some technological solutions there. But we also have to be cognizant that people are in business, and people want to be successful, and technology helps with it. So I think it's definitely a balance.
Appreciate that. So David, we have a question that just came in. This is from Susan. What are your top tips for individuals in data identity theft? And a few examples: brokerage accounts, email, social media, anything major out there, passwords and two-factor authentication.
That's an interesting question. I'm seeing a lot of that right now. I think we're seeing right now is somebody compromises somebody's email in some method. We all know to click on attachments, so we don't know where they're from and what have you. There's definitely some social engineering going on. But back in the day, if somebody was to hack Daniel's email, they would have to have access to your computer. Not anymore. They have to have access to your email, which is probably in a cloud server somewhere. So far this year, I've seen 5 or 6 cases of people intercepting people's emails and monitoring, letting it go through, and jumping in at a certain time. A good example would be a title company. A closing is coming up. There's email communications going between the closing statements, and all of a sudden the email comes in with a wiring instructions, and somebody who has inserted themselves into this email and wanted to stop that email, they make a change to it and then forward it on, and it looks visually like it's correct. And we have a case right now where people wired an awful lot of money to somebody other than the title company.
Wow.
So how do you protect that? Well, dual factor authentication is pretty standard these days on most cloud-based accounts. I think changing your password frequently, changing your method of dual factor authentication as well. Some are offering swapping services. Some are offering multi-factor. Some offer a text message, and you can set how long you have to respond to that. Keep mine to like 20 seconds. Some are offering an app on your phone, authenticator apps. And I think, you know, if you really truly want to protect yourself, I think you just have to do a variety of these things and change them commonly.
What frequency would you recommend in terms of password reset?
Well, yeah, some people may say I'm paranoid of mine. My passwords get reset every 2 weeks.
Okay, that's a good tip.
It's perhaps more than you need for a regular user, but we're dealing with some sensitive information.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. So we appreciate that question very much. And again, encourage everybody to ask questions in real time, and we'll get our expert to weigh in on those. So we've talked a bit about detecting IP theft and also some preventative measures. Talk about some of the challenges that forensic analysts like yourself face in today's ecosystem with a growing number of devices and data systems and ways we interact with technology.
It's really interesting. You know, we are a technology age, right? We have technology for everything. I think in the late 80s, when forensics was really getting started, and we dealt with the heavily complex task of making a forensic image of a computer or a desktop or a laptop. And I look forward now, it's like, man, it got complicated. Yeah, it got complicated. You know, we had supporting devices come in, and then mobile devices, and now Internet of Things. I'm told there's 20 billion IoT devices currently.
Billion?
28.
So these are not devices, these are connected devices.
These are connected devices. Some of them, you know, we have domestic, you know, people have Fitbit and maybe a Alexa or what have you, but commercially as well.
What are some oddball connected devices we may not think about?
In the city of Seattle and some other cities, they have connected trash cans. Trash cans. So they have sensors in them. So when they're 75% full, sensor kicks off, sends a message to the recycling plant, and it sends a message to the city. It says, hey, this needs to be collected, it needs to be full. And it creates the route for the people, you know, whoever's going to collect it the next day to where to go, and also saves time going to empty trash cans that are nothing in them. But it does more than that. It alerts all these different systems, health and safety, the recycling plant. This is what you've got coming. This is when it'll be there. And so there's a really use for that. And so we see that in other cities. We see it in the energy industry, a lot of connected devices. I remember a few years ago, I was with my oldest daughter who was having her first child, and we were in a labor ward, I guess is the right word, and there was not a nurse to be seen, and I was a little bit concerned about this. And so, being the protective dad, I went to the nurse's station. And I said, "Hey, we haven't seen the nurse in like a couple of hours. I mean," and the lady just pointed behind me, and I looked up and there was a whole bank of screens that had the unborn baby's heartbeat, this rhythm, that rhythm, the mother's temperature, blood pressure. And I was like,
whole dashboard,
the whole thing, and they're all connected devices. So, so new to be grandparents, looking out for that. If you go,
each connected device it has its own IP address, system files, and obviously data that's created on the fly. How many IP addresses are there now?
I don't think I can say the word. It's very long. I think there's something like 40 characters. I think a good analogy, Steve Lieberman once said, there's an IP address for every atom of the surface of the Earth 15 times over.
Okay.
So some time ago, we changed from IP4 to IP6. IP4, we really kind of ran out of IP addresses as all these new device types came around. Now IP6, there is just a ridiculously massive amount, and you know, it's brave to say we're going to run out of the foreseeable future, but I think that's true.
That's funny. Well, send me the number. We'll look up the.
I think it's 40 characters. I'm not sure how to say it.
Okay, this sounds like a good problem. I like that. So we have a question that's related to challenges. This is from our friends at EDRM, specifically Kaylee Wallstatt, who asks, forensics will play an even bigger role in identifying Gen AI deepfakes. How are you uniquely positioned to help customers with this issue?
Well, it's good to hear from Kelly.
We're big fans.
Big fans, very big fans. For multiple years, we've had this issue of validating evidence. In some ways, deepfakes is the same. So if you think of a deepfake and what it is, maybe somebody's taken a video and they've changed the face of the person in the video, or it's an audio recording and they've changed something. And we talk about that now because, it's generative and can be done fairly easily. But over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen people trying to change voice recordings. If you ever do a stock trade and you're on with your broker and it's recorded, and maybe the stock trade isn't a good, and somebody's trying to say, no, it wasn't me. There are patterns in the data you can look for where changes have been made. Recently, I've seen it with body cam, law enforcement wearing. So the similar process or mindset is used for what we're calling deepfakes now. I'm working on some semi-automated technology to flag things for further to look at because there's just so much data.
Mhm.
If you had a typical computer hard drive or a typical mobile device, you could have tens of thousands of images on that, 1,000 videos, and nobody's going to actually look at individual. So working on some technology to semi-automate the flagging of something would look right with the binary of the file, not the visual aspect. Some of these deepfakes are so good these days.
Hard to say.
You just can't tell the difference.
I guess one of the risks here, though, is as good as Gen AI is, right? It's not dispositive, right? And you're just, and maybe that last 20% is material.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot of talk about Gen AI right now. Some of it's amazing and some of it, I use generative AI to make there's some technology now where you can type in the scene that you want an image, a log cabin, mountains with snow, rivers, stream, and what have you. And it does a pretty good job. But then I did something like I was a sports person playing soccer, and they have 3 legs, which is not ideal for playing soccer. Maybe it is good for playing soccer.
Maybe an advantage.
Maybe an advantage. So a lot of talk about it. I mean, certainly used for in forensics. The detection of it is really used for us. And looking at patterns of data is written and stored in a certain order. And if something changes that, it stands out. So it applies to deepfakes, but also applies to previous deception techniques with data.
That's interesting. So obviously, defensibility and admissibility standards, those last few percentage points really matter when you're doing a comparison.
They do. Excuse me. And typically, if you get involved in something like that, this is really critical to the matter at hand. And it goes back to what we said at the very start. Talk to your client, talk to your customer. What is important? What is a successful outcome? What do you need to prove? Because there is no point in doing all these things, which in the costume will take longer, if it's really not relevant to the matter at hand.
I appreciate that. That's great advice. So we're going to shift gears here a bit to more tactical use case discussion, if that's okay. I guess a question that I get a lot of run by is, what should clients look for when they outsource this important work forensics discipline?
It's a good question. I mean, you think about we're in the legal environment here, so you want all the things that go with that. You want credibility and security and assurance and experienced people. I think conversely, you have to watch out for, some of my peers in the industry will call push button forensics, where you can go buy a tool, maybe even interesting computers.
Easy button.
Maybe you worked in a certain area of digital forensics, you came in to retire in, or whatever. You think, I could be a digital forensics consultant. And you buy a tool and you go on that training, you push the button and out comes all this data and gives the client, and the client's going, what is all this? So, there's more to digital forensics than the technology. The technology is very useful. There's new technologies that will really help us get to the facts that we're looking for quicker. But it's really how you interact with the client. Again, understanding their need, but being able to explain it to them. And being able to explain it in a way that is understandable, that would be understandable to a judge or a jury or an arbitration, rather than just spouting out a lot of technical talk about binary code and least bit encryption and things like that.
So the easy button, it sounds like it's tracking towards a report, a technical-based report. The interpretation of that is really where
Yeah, and it's probably a massive data dump. If you, again, if you're looking for IP theft, maybe somebody's been using USB devices. Why do you need all these other 27 pieces of information that are difficult to understand?
Appreciate you sharing that. So we had another question that just came in. This again is from Susan. Appreciate you, Susan. So as part of your forensic analysis surrounding IP theft, are you able to determine or recommend patch vulnerabilities, software patches, password resets, and access controls? So
I think I understand that question. Are you able to determine if that has happened in the past? Certainly, we find lots of vulnerabilities in systems. You hear about zero-day patch. It's like, do it today because we're in trouble. I do find that some busy users get a little complicit with this. They get a little thing saying, hey, your operating system has a patch. And like, well, I'm in the middle of something, so I'll snooze, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. It certainly doesn't help your cause, for sure. These patches are for a reason. And there are vulnerabilities everywhere. And software is not perfect. And it's never going to be perfect. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. So I think having a good regime of understanding when you should do patches. A lot of software organizations with a patch can break something else.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a lot of concern about that. So a lot of people are like, well, yeah. A lot of people are like, well, maybe I'll do that tomorrow and I'll just check online that nobody's complaining about. So we do see some of that. But in most cases, these patches are really essential and to protect you from, people who are highly motivated to get into your system.
That's great insight. Appreciate that. So we've got another question that just came in. This is from our friend Mary Mack. Thanks, Mary. So how are forensic tools integrating with traditional e-discovery platforms? And obviously, she's adding to this. It's got to be easy, right?
It's going to be easier. There has definitely been a disconnect between forensic processes and e-discovery from a tool set point of view. We have seen some e-discovery service providers trying to provide data collection and forensic analysis tools, and we've seen some forensic tools trying to provide tools for review, and it's been a challenge. I do think there's light at the end of that tunnel, though. I think most people who are experiencing forensics now and know that maybe their task may be to preserve or fulfill the EDRM preservation requirement by doing the collection. And what good is forensic image to an attorney who has discovery? And thinking about, okay, what do they need? So, in forensics, there may be some filtering done, there may be some data filtering, maybe even some searching, but ultimately, the data set is going to go into some kind of review environment and some process, and probably end up in a review environment. And I think that how that has been provided now by experienced people is really good for the receiving party. Previously, it might have been, here's a forensic image, kind of work it out, right? Well, all we need is the email account. Well, it's in there somewhere. So there's definitely, I definitely see progress there. And I've been on the receiving end of productions, and I've seen the more experienced people are actually trying to understand what you need. They're not trying to be adversarial. They're not trying to block you. They're just trying to help you do your job as part of this process.
Well, this goes back to what you talked about, how important it is discussing the outcomes your client needs. Part of that, obviously, is talking about how they intend to interact with data. And backing up one step further, that means the output has to be staged properly to get to that.
Yeah, what's the end goal? And if a client came to me and said, hey, it's like 3 Gmail accounts and 5 M365 accounts, and we're doing a data range, and we're going to process them and review them. The only thing you care about is emails with attachments, and you can get in every little bit of criteria you want. If we understood that, that's exactly what they would get. And as it would be put into review, it would be seamless from a client's point of view. Now, the flip side of that is clients don't always know.
Right.
And, if litigation is pending, expected, or maybe it's started, and they're working on preservation, and, we understand we have to preserve, and collection is not the only way to pursue it, but it's only one way. And if they're doing this because, it's not a hugely expensive thing and it puts us in a good legal position, we might get to discovery 6 months later or beyond. Those processes still should be in place. You may have a forensic image that is not of much use to anybody but the forensic examiner, but the process of understanding the needs of the client and what they need to do successful in their job still applies.
It's such an important point. In our practice here, we're constantly thinking about effort up and downstream and what format the data needs to be in for those people to accomplish their important work. So I appreciate you sharing that. I see we have another question, David. This is from Terry. So as digital collaboration becomes more prevalent, how can digital forensics effectively track and investigate instances of collaborative IP theft with multiple parties?
Well, we did see that. We talked about IP theft earlier as almost being an individual effort. Somebody wants to take something that's not theirs and use it for their own advantage later, but we do see groups of people doing that. We've seen them using collaborative tools. There are some ephemeral messaging which they think really protects them, and a little bit of a false sense of security there, perhaps. People use it end-to-end encryption because nobody would ever get into that, right? Well, if you have the device, it's the only encryption when I have it. So we do see that, and some of the larger litigations, we see groups of people, maybe sections of a business. They're going to go and work with company X or their competitors because they're upset to get the bonus or the promise the grass is greener or whatever reason. So with collaboration tools that we talk about, things like Teams and Slack and what have you, really the same. It's collected in a very similar manner. And back to how do you want to review this stuff, what you're looking for, and present it to a client in that manner.
And I know with the way we're working differently, and a lot of folks working remotely, the employment market, the state of everybody considering other alternative jobs, this is especially critical right now. There's been a lot of exits of groups, business units, leading in mass. This raises that profile for sure.
It does. It goes back to what we said a little bit earlier. Prevention. You people need to be able to do their job. We use technology every day for that. But you should really be cognizant of what you provide. What happens if that's misappropriated? There are certain technologies where you have to be connected to a certain server and approved by that server to open an attachment. Mm-hmm. We have a banking client who uses that technology right now. It makes a lot of sense for them.
As I hear you talk about all these stories and best practices, training has to be part of your strategy to defend against IP theft.
From a forensic perspective?
Well, forensics, but also behavioral.
Internally. I think, I've seen HR departments doing a lot better, making people aware of what they can and can't do. A lot of cyber training, don't click on this attachment because you think it's from your cousin or your best friend in Nigeria that's helped claiming their millions. So there is definitely more there. I think from a training point of view in forensics, I have a training post in a few weeks. People are like, you've done this for 35 years. So there's always new stuff.
Yeah, it changes all
right? And to be able to give a client the service you want to give them and to get to their end goals, new technology counts. I think if someone's coming into a career, there's a long training to be had for sure.
100%. This is great. Fascinating so far. I got a question for you. Are you up for a rapid fire session?
That's what the questions are. Sure.
You're going to do great. So I'm just fascinated by your career and many of the stories you have. I think the audience will some of these.
Okay.
So my first question, how did you get into forensics? You shared a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was doing some work for Outsmart as a contractor. And they came we were the computer guys and wasn't many computer guys around the 80s. And so they said, well, you're the computer guys, deal with this. And we had some challenges with that, but really got to the root of that. And somebody ended up in prison. Files that were recovered, which was, very gratifying for me. I've always kind of pursued justice. Mm-hmm. Never been a law enforcement employee, but done plenty of contract work with them. And And I just found it fascinating. And at that time, I was like, well, these are the parts of what I do are great as well, but this I'm really interested in. And it appealed to my investigative mindset, the technology side of it. Some people say I have an aptitude for it. I don't know, but I really enjoy the technology side of it as well. But combining that with the thought process and the focusing on what was good for the outcome for the customer, it's been great. So that was back in 1988.
You were 4.
Let's see.
Do you remember your first?
I do. It was that. So
Okay,
we talked about that and ended up with 12 years.
Appreciate sharing that. So I know you've got thousands of war stories over the years. What's the most unusual challenge you've had as a forensic analyst?
I hadn't been in the US for a while, and I came here in 2002, and I got to know some people in the community, and actually I knew some people in the community before I came here because, at that time, there was a handful of people that did this. And a friend, I certainly thought it was a friend at the time, asked me to help when I first came to the US. I lived in Florida. And he said, hey, you're in Florida. We have to collect somebody's computer in Lake Okeechobee. Where's that? Go on the map. Oh, it's not too far. It's a couple of hours. And so I made arrangements to go and just make an image of this computer, come away with the image. And when I got there, first of all, my cell phone lost signal, and I was really in the middle of nowhere. And I was trying to use it to navigate to this location. And the custodian of the computer was sat on his porch in a rocking chair with a shotgun across his chest.
All right. I'm super interested in what you got to say.
And he said, and you have to excuse the accent, right? He said, you're the boy, you gotta get my computer. And he's like rubbing the shotgun, and I'm just from the UK. We don't have weapons. And I'm like, I think I may be at the wrong address. And it kind of goes back to really understanding the client. And I said to him, what are your concerns? I hadn't been told by my friend, who's at this stage, I'm not sure it's still a friend. This was the adverse part.
Okay, that's helpful.
So would it be nice to know that? Anyway, I sat on his rocking chair next to him for about 20 minutes, and we chatted and went inside, and we imaged the computer, and he made me my first ever sweet tea.
Okay.
And came away with the image. But it was interesting, a little scary.
Talk about a war story. So I appreciate sharing that. It's a good reminder at the bedside manner, the way you care for the custodians for potentially turning loose their personal devices, their work devices. That's sensitive stuff for everybody.
Yeah, and we joke about, well, they have a shotgun, so you have to be nice to them, right? But in all seriousness, we talk about litigation and forensic investigation analysis because we do it all day, every day. You could be the person this happened to you once, or you're part of a group and you're freaking out because I've got my family pictures at the beach on here, I've got my tax returns on this computer. You can't. So you're absolutely right. There is really a way to talk to people about this, to help you understand the process and why those personal things on this device will never be looked at, never mind. And lawyers mostly do a very good job with that as well. I think being successful in digital forensics, you need to have those persuasive but reassuring skills as well, because people are concerned.
Yeah, you've got to do it with peace of mind as much as you can. That's all. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. So, any super unusual collection, device or location?
I do remember being asked to go to Bermuda, and I was like, wow, I'm going to Bermuda. This is going to be great. Right? It's this beautiful island somewhere in the Atlantic. I don't really know where it is. And then I was told it was to make a forensic image of a VHS cassette. So I imagined myself again. I was like, well, there's no reason why it couldn't be done. So like a good forensics person that's never done this before, you do it at home or you do it in the lab and you get a VHS cassette. And then you have somebody watch the recording and the cassette side by side to make sure. So the process was proven. So I arrived late Thursday night, and the client set us up. They set up the hotel and everything. And this incredibly beautiful hotel is $1,000 a night.
Oh, wow.
Which apparently Bermuda is not that expensive. I don't know. And this is beautiful. So next morning, I'm going to image this video cassette. I'm allowing a couple of hours. I have a bit afternoon flight back. I think I was flying out of Atlanta. And there was some dispute between the attorneys about whether we can actually do this. And I said, hey, can you stay on until lunchtime? We were having some discussion. Sure. So lunchtime comes around, and now we've got one eye on the clock. It's like, do I need to change my flight? And the attorney came to me, and she was super apologetic. And she said, look, there's a dispute going on here. We're going to have a hearing this afternoon with the judge about this. I can tell you that this is going to happen. It's going to happen Monday. So can you come back on Monday? I said, sure. Do you want me to go home? Oh, no, stay on the island. Stay on the island. We've changed your hotel. We have a per diem for you. And so I spent the weekend. I rented a moped. I went to a spa, drove around the island. It was just like incredibly beautiful. Monday morning came around. I went to image this video cassette, which was a big anticlimax. It took like 20 minutes. Checked the image, made sure I had a copy of the image. I went to the airport and flew home. And as I called my wife on Friday and said, good news, bad news. Bad news, I'm going to be home this weekend, but the good news is I'm going to be in Bermuda hanging out. Good time.
That's awesome. They don't always go that way. That's a great story.
They mostly don't go.
Mostly don't go that way. I appreciate you sharing that. So last question in the rapid fire session. What's the most fulfilling case you've worked on?
Probably a case I can talk a lot about, but I was involved when I was in the UK helping law enforcement in a hostage situation, 2 children being kidnapped. And as is normal, there's a proof of life picture. And this was before we all had location services and we could turn on, turn off. But in the picture was the longitude and latitude of the location where the picture was taken. And very quickly managed to get that from the image, give it to law enforcement. And I think 12 minutes later, they went and rescued the victim. So very fulfilling, really back to my pursuit of justice and love of children. So that was very fulfilling.
I appreciate you sharing. That's a great story too. And thanks for your help and service. Well, this is good. Any other questions? Okay. If you do have other questions, be sure to submit them. We'll answer them offline and report back. I want to thank you for joining us for the Art of the Steal, how forensics can help you outsmart intellectual property thieves. So I'm Daniel Bonner, Director of Legal. David, pleasure to be with you here today.
Thank you, Daniel. I enjoyed it.
Really appreciate your great insight and thoughts and all you shared. For more information like this, come to our website, levellegal.com. And please join us next month. September Level Table Live will feature EDRM expert Mary Mack and Keely Walston.
Excellent.
So this is going to be at 1 to 2 Central, Wednesday, September 27th. And the title is the EDRM Story Hour, the past, present, and future of the big idea and e-discovery.
That's going to be great.
We're thrilled to have you. We're looking forward to it. And I want to invite everybody to keep an eye out for the registration details. So thanks again, David. We appreciate everybody joining us. And we'll see you soon. Have a great day.